All right, I see us. So that's a good sign. Hello, everybody. We are going to give this a couple minutes here. I was making sure that Zoom was connecting to Facebook beautifully and we aren't having any problems, which is wonderful. But if you happen to hop on, I would love for you to let us know if you can hear us, you can see us, and that way we're not talking to the void and no one is getting this information. So we'll give it a few minutes here and then we will dive into this amazing event. I want to thank everybody who has joined in the last bit here since we've been talking about this special event. Welcome, welcome. If you are new to our group, I'm so honored for you to be here with us. And we are just so excited about this event. And we're going to be covering a lot of really great information on the topic of how breastfeeding or chest feeding can impact our mental health. And we're going to have some great resources for you all and just mostly inviting the conversation to take place because Lola and I both agree that this is a topic that gets vastly overshadowed by the breast is best, you know, all these things, these societal pressures. And so for those of us who don't successfully or cannot successfully lactate in the way that we had envisioned, this can be very traumatic for us because our expectations don't meet our reality. And then we have this feeling of shame, guilt, nowhere to go, perhaps even an identity loss. A lot of things can happen with this. And so we're so excited to talk about that. It's going to be a very conversational, relaxed setting. We don't want this to be sterile in any way. We probably have a couple statistics to share with you all, but really we want this to just be a safe, inviting place for you to ask your questions and even share your experiences if you feel called to do so, because sharing our stories can be very healing. So with that mini introduction, I just want to say welcome. My name is Jessie Sletton, and I am the owner and facilitator of this amazing community. I am also a postpartum empowerment coach, and I work one-on-one with clients to help them exchange surviving for thriving through holistic recovery plans that are focused on healing, nourishing, and bonding in the postpartum timeframe. I also work with birthing people who are pregnant so they can prepare for their postpartum in a more holistic way. So that they have self-care, healing, nutrition, all of the things that they need already at the forefront of their minds. So moving into postpartum, they're able to really embrace that and have a postpartum timeframe that is fully supported. So that's who I am. And my very, very special guest who I'm so honored to have here tonight is Lola Brognano. I said that right? We practiced beforehand.
Yes.
Okay. I'm so happy you're here. So why don't you just introduce yourself very briefly, let us know who you are, and we'll dive into our conversation and our topic.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jessie. It's a pleasure being here. We've been talking and, kind of collaborating, and it's an honor to share and be here. My name is Lola, and I am in private practice. I am a licensed clinical social worker in Tallahassee, Florida, and I have certification in perinatal mental health. And we are here to have conversation, to have community. And so it's an honor. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, I appreciate you. You actually reached out to me about this topic, and I was just so excited because I hadn't really thought about sharing about this before, which is very strange because it is a part of my story and my experience. And I think that it was a beautiful idea that you came up with. And so I'm just so honored that we were able to get together and have this discussion. I'm just going to be briefly, if you see me all kind of, veering away from the camera to the side, I have my phone pulled up so that I can monitor for comments. I want to be sure that if you have questions or something that you would like to share, that I am able to bring that up so that those who are going to be catching the recording can hear about those comments, can hear those stories shared, all of those things. And I do want to remind you in the event and in the descriptor here, you will see a register link. So there's still time to register for this event. I'm actually not going to close that registration. So if you know of someone later down the line who could benefit from this recording, please feel free to share that registration or go to it yourself, so that you can, look back at a later time at this recording. It'll be sent to your inbox. And also I'm gifting a workbook that I had put together that have helped me prepare for my second breastfeeding journey after struggling with my first. And it's a workbook that's really kind of an actionable thing to work through to help you process some of those experiences that you might have. So that'll be gifted to you as well. All right, so let's dive in. I'm so excited to do this. I haven't seen anybody. Oh, I lied. Melissa is here with us. Hi, Melissa.
Melissa.
I'm so glad you could join. So yes, I will be monitoring those. If you have anything you would like to share or questions, please feel free to drop those. And if you can't hear us at any point, let us know, or if the broadcast is disrupted as well, that'd be a great heads up for us. So Lola, I'm just going to let you kind of take the lead here, and we'll just kind of have conversation back and forth for whatever's kind of inspired or what we come in from the comments. But I know we were going to cover kind of some themes that come up with breastfeeding trauma, those sort of things, feelings that we can kind of run into when breastfeeding, chest feeding doesn't happen the way that we envision it.
Yeah. That's kind of the conversation that we don't have, it's breastfeeding, chest feeding has been shown to have positive effects for mother and baby. On the other side of that, though, when we were saying the expectation is not met, it can have negative consequences in the sense of trauma, grief, and a lot of the stuff that, we're going to talk about today. What can come with that. The construct that, we are in kind of is unfair in that way, in the sense that women and mothers, there's an expectation of what that is. There's a vision that we learn very early on, right? Like kind of from the day we're born almost. If we get a pink hat on our head, we have a course kind of set for us in a way. Right. And so with that comes a lot of, that culture that can be dangerous of breast is best, right? And we do know, that, milk nourishes, but mothers nourish their babies. And so, we have the new movement of fed is best, because we know so much more now about how this can absolutely affect a person to their core, their sense of self, their identity. And you have, a workbook, a journal that you wrote about, was it your experience?
Yeah. So I'll just share a little bit of my story now, if that's okay, because it just feels like that's the flow. Yeah. But I've shared a little bit about that in the past in this group, but I have so many new people. So really my experience with my first son was I had done so much prep work in pregnancy for the birth, for how to breastfeed. I took all the breastfeeding classes. I did all the research for the things that I would need to breastfeed successfully, what pumps were the best out on the line, what, accessories, all of these things. Right. And so I had built up this expectation and this understanding of I was going to be a breastfeeding mother. And that was how I was envisioning my postpartum. And of course, I had also seen, I was the first of my friend group to become pregnant. So that was a really difficult thing on its own. I didn't have that connection to someone who I had seen go through this. So it was very much everything that I had seen on social media, in the movies, all these things, right? And so I didn't have the piece of it can be hard and there can be things that go wrong. I just had the rainbows and sunshine, and so when I gave birth, there was a lot of other stuff to this story, but after I had delivered, I was just exhausted, as so many of us are after birth and labor. And it was to the point where I could not even hold my son at one point in the evening. And I had a terrible time getting him to latch. I had lactation support. I don't like to call it really that, because it wasn't. It was a nurse who did not ask permission to touch my body. She did not do any of these things that I felt I was being cared for. It was more of, I was an object that would be pushed into the baby's mouth. Right. And so it was very much this traumatic experience of, I'm in pain. This latch doesn't feel well, but I'm being ignored. My voice isn't being honored, and my baby is struggling. And it was just like, here, let me do it for you, sort of thing. And so I didn't know what I was doing. And I felt like it was something I was doing wrong. Right. And so that I did not rest, because I needed to get him to latch properly. And at one point I actually dropped my son, and it was in the middle of the night. My husband was taking a well-deserved rest, and there was no nurses to be found. And I had dropped him, and we're talking like this far, right? I'm in bed. So it wasn't far, but it was this point that I remember just like breaking me, because not only could I not get my son to latch and to breastfeed naturally, like I thought I was going to be able to, but I also now dropped my son and could have damaged him in some way. Right. And so it was so traumatic for me to have this experience where it wasn't what I envisioned. And then I'm a horrible mom because I dropped my baby. I can't nourish him. And so that really set our stage to how breastfeeding started.
Yeah.
And that was not a good place to begin, right? It was very traumatic. And I learned that I had flat nipples, which I didn't even know was a thing. And so it was difficult figuring out how to navigate using a shield and all these extra things that I didn't know you had to have, or needed. And so that's kind of where my story began. And it really affected my mental health. I had postpartum anxiety and later developed postpartum depression. And I did not get help for that until a year postpartum, because I was filled with so much shame and guilt that this was happening to me, and that I wasn't able to be that super mom who could just easily do it like that. Birth happened and I couldn't just go with it. Right. I was struggling. And so that was really my experience. And I like to tell people and say, I was able to successfully breastfeed for 13 months, but that looked different to me than what I had envisioned because of all the problems that I had and the lack of support. I would go to these breastfeeding clinics through the hospital, and it felt like I was exposed and on display, and I didn't have that personalized support. It was just like, okay, next mom, okay, this is taking too long, or, oh my gosh, he only transferred this amount of milk. It was very like shamey, or something was always wrong. It wasn't the supportive, well, let's really dig into what's going on, or how are you feeling, or that connection of me as a human being. It was just the milk producer who was producing poorly,
Absolutely.
So it was that lack of
autonomy,
Yes.
No bodily autonomy of, we're just like the vessel that produces, and we serve no other purpose. We are not that human that needs the connection and the encouragement and the support,
Yes, exactly. So it was from the beginning to the end. And then, and it was just, and all these anxieties too, on like, I was very much on a schedule for feeding instead of knowing that, or learning or being told that I should follow my baby's cues. It was very much at that time, every 2 hours. So, it was almost like this anxiety inducing thing to do anything outside the home, because it would disrupt that schedule that I had to stick to, and so my anxiety just peaked and peaked and peaked. And it really led to a bad spiral and things that I never knew could happen, like rage and all these other things that were tied to my anxiety. And so that's really my personal story. I kind of shared a lot there, but I just, I want to set the precedence and the vulnerability of in this room to say, I want it to be a safe space. And I wanted to lead by example by kind of sharing my story with how that impacted me. And it might look different than somebody else's story. Of course it will look different. But it still impacted my mental health. And I wish I would have had that mother-centered care in my lactation support.
Mother-centered, yes.
That is so important because I feel like so much is focused on the baby, which it needs to be, because we need to make sure that they're getting nourished right properly. But the mother is just forgotten about. We're that vessel, like you said. That's all it is. And something's broken if it's not working right, you know?
Absolutely. I think you really kind of touched on that about how if there's so much riding on this,
right?
So much riding on this, and it's solely us. That whole sense of the identity and the responsibleness of this is riding, and it increases anxiety and panic and obsessive worry. Okay. And it is definitely, it can be a spiral. It can shatter a person when that huge rigid expectation that they kind of set us up to, you know, and with that, with, you know, your story that you shared with us, and perhaps others are sharing or reflecting. And as we're talking about this today, I think it's really important that we, you know, acknowledge that if we're talking and it's hard and it's sensitive and it can feel activating, you know, we encourage you to honor yourself in the way to take care of yourself and kind of, you know, center yourself, get present where you are. We are here to have a conversation about how we can tell our stories so that it becomes normalized to where other mothers, we don't have to wait until our other friends have children to know. We will just start to have this knowledge because it's going to be ingrained, interwoven into our societal construct. Taking care of mothers as a community, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And thank you for that. I had planned on doing that at the beginning of just that reminder of, you know, this can be a heavy thing to sit with. And if it's not the right time for you to sit with this at the moment, this will be recorded. So at any point, if you're in a better space where you can connect to yourself and you're able to listen and absorb some of this at a different time, please feel free to do that. Take care of yourself and really listen to how this is sitting with you, for sure. Thank you for that reminder, Lola. But yeah, so that's really kind of my story. And I think we've touched on a lot of the themes that we do see and hear when we're working with you know, mothers and lactating individuals and parents who experience that, you know, shame, that guilt, that loss of identity, all of these kind of themes that are pretty prevalent, but we have a hard time talking about them. For sure. And I know, you know, some other things that kind of come up that I like to kind of touch on is really like this sense of grief shouldn't be something that is shamed or invalidated, or, you know, I feel like when I tried to talk about my experience with people who didn't really know that path because it wasn't their experience, a lot of times I felt this sense of, well, it's really not that big of a deal, or, well, there's formula, so it's okay. Or, you know, it was very dismissive of my experience and I never really felt heard. And so I want to encourage you to know that this space, I really want it to be set up where you can feel heard and seen. And we're going to talk about some ways that you can feel in control of your experience where things can't be controlled, but there are pieces that you can control when you're going through something like this, a trauma or holding that grief. And experience that loss in a way. So I think having that support and finding and identifying that support is so crucial. Whether that's family support, whether that's seeing a wonderful therapist like Lola, who can provide that for you in a way that's safe, or even, groups that are made for this sort of thing, community groups. I know, Lola, you have a lot of resources we're going to be sharing too around that, to have that space. But I really think it's important that you know where to turn and who you can identify ahead of time, which can be hard. But if you're in the moment, knowing that too. And so that's why we want to provide those resources for those who might be experiencing it currently. But if you're coming into this in pregnancy, when I work with my one-on-one clients, I try to say, like, let's identify that resource now, for you. If things don't go the way you plan, we work on postpartum plans. And I think that's very important to do, and it's in a way where we can pivot and we can learn where to shift, but still know where to go for that support, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Working on, our feeding plan, it's very helpful, but it's only one part of it, right? It's the other part is, what do we do when or if that can't be the case?
Right.
And how do we be okay with it and with ourselves, and I think, you really said something that really is so true and oftentimes not understood, certainly not with empathy, is that, loss is not just a physical death. Grief is over any kind of thing that is no longer, right? So a lot of times people forget too, right, that we're also grieving like the vision that we have of a future of something, right? Like we envision the whole entire thing following through, not just the act of it, and so we don't only grieve that part of it, we grieve the future version we thought we knew of ourselves, because if goodness, our sense of self right now is crumbling, future version certainly is, because those conversations and the grief is not understood or held. And, people get grief, time at work, and it's very specific. I am saddened and shocked, and it's so awful to hear that people go into places for help and to say, like, I need time. My heart is grieving a loss, right? That we have to defend it and define it in order to qualify to take that time. And some people have been told that's not a real loss. And
it just makes me start to, like, my eyes start watering, because and that's the reality that we go through. Is it's so true, because it's not seen by their experience or by our societal cultural understanding of what loss and grief is. And it's not viewed that way. And so it's not validated in that way. And so then that's a whole nother layer that we add on to this healing process. We start questioning, should this really be impacting me this bad? Like, oh, maybe I'm overreacting, and we start questioning our own feelings and our own experiences, which I feel makes that so much deeper of a trauma and grief, because we can't then allow ourselves to feel it and go through that and experience what we need to experience to be able to move forward,
we start questioning the experience, and we start comparing it. And that's when we get stuck in that place, right, where we think everybody else was able to pull it off, when in reality, no one was talking about the suffering, because we're not allowed and we don't know how. Our culture does not know how to deal with grief. No. We hate it. We're so uncomfortable with it. And so the mom next to you, who probably went through the same yet unique experience, didn't feel safe to talk either. And so it just starts trickling down when it's just so common.
Right. It's so true. Yeah. And I did see we had something come in, so I want to pause for a moment to honor that. It's with Melissa. She's still joining us. She says, it's like, I'm sitting here bawling right now. going through this anxiety and today, but the rage stage, just less than an hour ago. As hard as this is exactly what I need right now. Thank you so much for sharing that, Melissa. That's such a vulnerable thing to be able to open up with. I do know your story a little bit more personally, so I know that this is very fresh for you. And so I'm glad that this is just what you needed. I wanted to create that space for somebody who's maybe right in the trenches right now, needing to hear these stories, as well as anybody who has maybe some distance behind them, like me, who it's still so beneficial to know that you are not alone and that we can come together to try to heal communally, and know that this is a safe place to do so and to get those resources. And I don't want this to be, when I say to heal, to be associated with, let's move on from it. I want this to be an opportunity to invite you to say, please feel your grief. We've been talking about that a little bit, but it's so true. It's like, I don't want this to be yet another place where you're like, oh, okay, I should be done. No one can tell you when your grief is over. No one can tell you that.
No.
And I think that's hard too. Kind of what you were saying, Lola, with, our society doesn't define that as what we think grief should be, or it's so strict on what we see could qualify for bereavement time. But there is no timeline. Time does not heal all. I'm sorry. That is kind of a bullshit thing. That is for some reason, what we hear all the time. Oh, time will heal it. That's not how it works. That's not how healing works, just because we might be further away from it. There's a lot that goes into the healing process, and therapy can be a beautiful way to help us move through that, as you can attest to being a therapist. I'm sure you see this all the time in your clients. Not one person's grief journey is going to be the same as the next.
Right. Yeah. Right. We all come from, our own experiences, and based on so many factors, right?
Right.
What culturally we look at loss differently, our own homes. How did we treat that? And how did we have any kind of struggle? How do we deal with that? How do we look at that? And when it comes to certain roles in society, right? Like, this is one of the top when it comes to so complex and ambiguous, everything that goes into this, that simply, and we say simply, right, that just the mixed messages alone, right, of breast or chest feeding is enough to cause new mothers, someone who's had a child already does not mean the next experience, right, is going to be the same.
Right.
That's something a lot of people don't understand either. And that does play into, perinatal and maternal mental health. There are risk factors. There are risk factors that we have. And a lot of those are things like, have we had grief before? Mm-hmm. Have we had certain struggles like, depression or anxiety? It's very likely that it's going to have an onset during pregnancy and postpartum. And one of the biggest one of them is breastfeeding. And as you know, which you can provide much more of that side of, the oxytocin and all that goes into, right, that part of it, so in that way, we're coming here today holistically, right? And we want to honor, and at the same time, the struggles and acknowledge and hold that safe space of the grieving of this and the accompanying feelings of how someone can feel shame over their body not working, right? The way that we're told to, and then we feel our body is broken and that I can't even nourish my baby. Right. I'm a failure as a mother. Who am I as a woman if my body's not working? That can lead into depression. Right. That can lead into anxiety and obsessive worry about baby weight, right? I'm not right? I mean, and it can spiral. And if we can't talk, if we don't have enough supports in place. And so a lot of what you do is so important, right? Trying to get and educate all of us before and during, so that we can plan for these things. We can get our partners involved. And, you know, because breastfeeding, we were saying, should be a family affair. Chest feeding should be a family affair between the families, so that, the baby can learn that the father, the partner, is just as available to provide nourishment, and that forms that attachment that so later, can be shattering if we don't have.
Right.
So it is helpful in that way that we were talking about support, right? That getting the partner involved can happen before we are in the birth room. So going to the classes with us, practicing, right? Learning the basics of anatomy and what it does, and then of course, we know that skin to skin is beneficial for mothers, but they're learning, of course, too, that partners also benefit from that and bonding, and that can start also the creation that we are all in charge of this and responsible for this and involved, so that no one person, especially the birthing parent, is not expected to be the soul, because of the shattering, crushing weight that can come with that, as we were saying, right?
Yes.
And kind of what you were saying with your expectations and how it can just get ripped away.
Right. Right.
So all through the way that you kind of do your plans, I think it's a really good way, for what we were talking about today, to kind of be involved.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I know that we did get a question around the partner support when it comes to breastfeeding. And we want to acknowledge that too, because it's so true. It could be a two-sided thing, right? It's a double-sided coin, or whatever you want to say. It can be on the one end where we are doing fine with our breastfeeding journey, but we have an unsupportive partner, right? And that leads us to discontinuing maybe early from our breastfeeding journey or chest feeding journey, because we don't have that support. So that can be devastating, and that can be a trauma or a grief that we experience. And then on the other side, we might have that supportive partner, but we are unable to lactate for whatever reason, or we have struggles, or we have immense amount of pain, and we don't have the lactation support that is mother-centered to say, how are you doing? You are just as important, or if not more, than the way you feed your child. It is, you are more important than the way you feed your child. So checking in with how that chest or breastfeeding parent is doing physically and mentally, and saying and being able to hold that space and almost give that permission and validation to say, it's okay to discontinue. It's okay to discontinue.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what's best for you and baby at this point.
We were saying that how important is that to us to feel that, and that someone has our back and is going to, kind of be that buffer outward, and also really honestly, we're already getting enough of it out there, right? Like we don't need it inside our comfort zone, and our vulnerable place either. And so we really do need that person to go to bat for us and be the gatekeeper and say, right? Because sometimes we always talk about, and I want to acknowledge, I really do, that we kind of sometimes forget that sometimes a woman or someone who is considering chest feeding knows it's not good for them, for their mental health. And they know they can't in that way. Not that their body can't.
Yes.
Okay, but their mental health can't. And that is a huge stigma alone right there.
Yes.
And if our partner is not on board with that, we could, what you said, right, end up possibly ending early, stopping early. But one little thing about under there is that sometimes there can be like a resentment there that and it can come out in that anger and rage later.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that's not
Yes.
really what maybe you wanted.
Right.
And your supportive partner the unsupportive partner had, you know, an influence with what you decided, you know?
Right. Yeah. I love that you took the space to mention that, because it is true. For breast and chest feeding is a very personal decision that person who is providing that is making. Okay. And so if it is something that they know, like you said, right from the beginning, they just don't want to do.
Yep. Yeah.
That needs to be honored as well. You know, and so it's super important that you build within your support system those advocates who will honor your decision and honor what is best for you, and go to bat for you, like you're saying, Lola, and say, like, yes, you made the best decision, so that you could be present and that you could enjoy this transition and this huge change as a family, or just, and maybe you're not partnered and it's you're on your own, right? And you knew these are the things that you needed for yourself to be able to best support your child during a difficult time, right? Or a beautiful time, and make it a beautiful time. And so I think that's really important to acknowledge too, because that's even more stigmatized, I think, in our current situation than some of these other things. But like I said, I don't want to do that comparison game either, but I want to acknowledge that that can be a very difficult position to be in if you've made that choice. And then all of a sudden you're shamed for it, or people don't understand, well, you could do it, so why, you know? And so it can be that dangerous thing. Yes. And as people who are walking with grief too, it can be hard for us to acknowledge that and hear those stories. Because if you couldn't do it and you weren't able to because of some sort of anatomical reason, and somebody was, and they just decided not to, that can bring up some feelings for you as well. And so being able to honor those feelings without also casting shame and holding that space for somebody else who has a different experience is something that's hard, but it's something that it's important for all of us to try to practice that. It's
important and necessary, because every individual is coming from their own space, you know, and going outward into the community. If we appreciate autonomy, everyone else does. And I think it's really important too, right? Like that like you said, right? Like if someone knows from the get-go how they feel, like we shouldn't have to just wait until something's wrong or doesn't go right, or your body didn't work. We don't have to wait to make decisions. If bodily autonomy, right? Because there is that thing called being touched out, right? Because we really, if we don't have that autonomy, even when we're pumping, okay, we are connected to we don't get to clock out, right? You know, and we are kind of in that place where a lot of sometimes mom rage really can develop in that breastfeeding, chest feeding place of where they cannot have that bodily autonomy. And so during that time, they can feel touched out, right? They can't go to the bathroom alone with the other toddlers. You're trying to do this too, and then your husband's coming around and it's like, you know, I can't be touched. I can't, don't even hug me, you know? There's so much that goes into the, you know, that's why it's so complex, the simple act. It's just, there's so much intertwined in this, you know? And so I am really appreciative of, you know, Melissa sharing her story, and you too.
Yeah. And I think, you know, this, like you're saying, it is such a far-reaching topic, and there's no way that we could touch on every possible experience because each one is unique. But I just want to drive home the fact that each one is valid, and that what you went through or are going through or may go through in the future is your experience, and no one else should decide how you should feel about it and when you should stop feeling that way about it. And so I just wanted to drive that point home and to say, the work that I do, I do it from a holistic standpoint where we make sure that you surround yourself with those people who are supportive, who you know you can go to when you are bawling and things are not going well and you feel broken on the floor, who can come and uplift you, right? And that's so important. I call that your postpartum village. You want to ensure that who's ever a part of your postpartum village, they each play their own role and they each have that supportive piece to help ensure that you are being mothered just as you are mothering your child, right? And I think that piece is so important. And really just knowing your resources too ahead of time is going to get you that help and that support even quicker. Because let's say you don't have anybody in your family or in your friend community that you feel could do that for you. So who are those community resources outside of that who could step into that role for you? And knowing that there is support out there, but sometimes we have to go find it, you know?
Yes. And a lot of times we're finding it now on social media.
Yeah.
So right here, like today.
Yes.
So, we are going to be providing, some resources, because it really is, as we know, human beings are social creatures. Mm-hmm. And we did start off as a village and community as people. Yes. And we need that so much during the parenting process, mm-hmm. And nurture the nurturer,
yes.
Right.
Love that. Yes. So yeah, I will be getting this document that Lola, you really took a wonderful time curating this list here. Of course, I can't find it now where I had it open, but there's a lot of forums. If you want to just kind of briefly talk about some of the things that are on there, and then I will be sure to provide that for everyone.
Sure. As we were talking about resources, formal, informal, of mm-hmm. course, we were saying is really important. And some of the stuff is, more convenient than others. Like a lot of people, they don't necessarily like to read and stuff. So a lot of the stuff that, I kind of put together is a lot of like forums, mm-hmm. Where there's already something set up and you can join into different conversations and get different, discussions going and kind of see where you feel. There's a couple of places like, Baby and Bump, that has a huge dozens and dozens of threads in there. There's a lot of Facebook groups on this list because there's a lot of support groups there, and Instagram has a lot of ones as well. We also have on there some resources for Black moms that are breastfeeding, mm-hmm. and for birthing and breast or chest feeding trans people and allies. Mm-hmm. We have some support and connections on there as well. And Postpartum Support International, which is one of the kind of like, I'd say like clearinghouses of, it's the epitome of where we go for all of, maternal wellness and maternal mental health. And they have a very specific support there that's offered, and it's free. And they have a breast and body feeding coordinator available for resources for support, empathy and validation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And connection. So if there's something more that you need, because it has reached that point where it is impacting your mental health, being able to have those resources to get you to the right place, and connecting.
And PSI has the area people such as myself who have certification in perinatal mental health.
Yes. Which is beautiful. Cause I think that is such a specific population that needs to have that training. That is, I don't know. It's just, I've been to therapy before that just doesn't know how to honor the unique path that a parent walks, right? And some of the things that we can come up that we're talking about today, and those other things that might happen too, in the perinatal timeframe. And then I also have 2 really great book resources. So if you are wanting something that's more on your own time that you can process while working with someone else like Lola, a therapist or something along those lines, or if you just need some sort of healing journey on your own, there's 2 really great resources that I like to recommend, and they're both books. One is called Healing Breastfeeding Grief, and the other one is called Why Breastfeeding, Grief, and Trauma Matter. So I will drop links to both of those books as well. I believe they're available on Amazon. And pretty much anywhere that you can get books, but they're both very well written. And I feel like they give really good, that validation that we're looking for. And there's some stories that are shared in there and those type of things as well. So I'll drop those in the same document that we are collecting for you all. Just want to pause real quick and make sure there's no other questions. I don't see any, so that is good. I know this was kind of a longer conversation, but I just felt there's so much for us to discuss.
I know we could go forever, right?
We really could, but I don't want it to get too long so that people who are watching the recording aren't like, okay, wrap it up, ladies. But yes, and I just want to say thank you again so much, Lola, for being here with me and for offering this topic to be discussed in this space. You're welcome, Melissa. Thank you so much for being with us live. And for anybody who is watching the recording, I want you to know that if this is something that you still want to share your story in a way to help with your healing process, please know that this group is a safe place to do so. Or if you just need to speak to somebody, I want you to know that my DMs are always open, and feel free to reach out. And if I'm not the right person to talk to about that, I, just like Lola, I'm a PMH certified as well, and I have lots of resources and connections. So if you need to get with someone who is in your area, a therapist, if you need a provider who is more educated on perinatal mental health, that sometimes is very important, especially if you're dealing with birth trauma and those type of things. PSI is a great resource center for those kind of things too. So if I can't serve you directly, I want to be able to ensure that you can be served, and connect you to the right place. So that's always something that I want to offer. And I know you're located in Florida, correct, Lola? Yeah. So I think we have some folks who are in Florida. So
I'm able to virtually practice in the state of Florida. So absolutely, you can reach out to me. I can hook you up with connections if you need, or I am available as well.
Awesome. And I know this isn't directly related to breastfeeding grief, but you do have a free support group that you just started up, right? Do you want to share about that real quickly in case that's relevant?
Well, that is a perinatal and infant loss support group. It's a grief group. And so, grief comes in all packages, although that's the commonality that we have as the human experience is grief, and so it's virtual, so that, and it's not therapy, it's support. So it is available to anyone, anywhere. And that's every other week on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard. You can DM me.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah. And I'll get that link from you too. So maybe we can provide that if there are folks in here who are dealing with that sort of loss as well. All right. Well, I think that should be our time. I just want to quickly look one more time to make sure there's nothing else on here. Melissa says, after struggling producing milk twice now and feeling like a failure with breastfeeding and feeling like I shouldn't be so upset about it, this was very validating and comforting. I am so happy to hear that, Melissa. I'm so glad you made this live so that we could connect in this way. For those that are catching the replay, please let us know if there was anything that you wanted to share, any resources you may need. I will be providing that wonderful curated list that Lola has come up with for us, and I will add a few to the list as well. I will put that in the documents section of the group. And for those who registered, I will also include that in the recording video email that I send out so that you can have that as well. Thank you so much, Lola, for joining us today. And if you guys need anything at all, just reach out. We're here for you. And we will see you all very soon. Thank you.